In 1892, the Vanderbilts spent $11 million building Marble House. $7 million went to imported marble alone. That construction figure made headlines. But the cost no one discussed was far more consequential. It was the relentless expense of keeping these estates running. There were permanent staff in the hundreds, aging systems, sprawling grounds, and a tax code about to change everything. Building a grand estate was expensive. Maintaining one is where the real story begins. Ship manifests from 1891 list crates of Italian marble arriving at Newport's docks, each shipment logged with a freight surcharge that sometimes rivaled the value of the stone itself. Marble House's construction ledger records more than $7 million spent on imported stone, out of an $11 million total, an outlay that dwarfed the cost of most American factories of the era. The marble arrived not just as raw blocks, but as columns, mantles, and sculpted panels, each piece requiring teams of European artisans to unpack, assemble, and finish on site. Contractor notes from the period show repeated payments to stonecutters, gilders, and mosaicists, some of whom were kept on retainer for years after the house was completed. These craftsmen did not just build Marble House, they became a permanent fixture in its maintenance, called back to repair settling cracks, polish worn surfaces, and replace damaged ornament. Invoice folios reveal a pattern, every imported material locked in a future dependency. Even minor repairs meant waiting for specialized tools, or for a master craftsman willing to cross the Atlantic again. Freight surcharges, customs duties, and the need for rare skills kept the estate's maintenance costs high and unpredictable. The original extravagance, marble on a scale never before seen in a private home, guaranteed that upkeep would never be routine or inexpensive. Every year, Marble House's ledgers filled with new charges for cleaning, restoration, and replacement, all tied to that first, spectacular decision to build with stone meant to last centuries, but needing constant expert care. The cost of opulence was not just paid once, but renewed with every season. Biltmore's grandeur rested not only on imported stone and rare wood, but on a permanent workforce whose numbers rivaled those of a small village. Payroll ledgers from the early 20th century list winter rosters between 120 and 140 staff, each assigned a specific role within a rigid hierarchy. The head housekeeper managed day-to-day logistics, overseeing teams of housemaids, cooks, and laundry workers, while the chief butler coordinated footmen, valets, and pantry staff. Gardeners, chauffeurs, and stable hands formed a separate outdoor corps, responsible for the estate's sprawling grounds and carriage houses. Wages for this invisible army absorbed a staggering share of annual expenses. Before World War I, the average servant at Biltmore earned around $800 per year, with senior staff commanding higher sums and additional in-kind benefits like uniforms and on-site housing. Uniform provisioning alone added roughly $150 per employee to the yearly budget, a cost documented in textile shop receipts and household accounts. The outbreak of war in 1914 unleashed new volatility. With labor in short supply and inflation rising, Biltmore was forced to increase wages by as much as 25% between 1914 and 1918, echoing broader national trends. Retention bonuses and improved living quarters became necessary to keep experienced staff from leaving for better-paying industrial jobs or war-related work. Payroll records from this period show not only higher base wages, but also line items for bonuses and emergency hires to cover sudden vacancies. The fixed year-round payroll created a structural burden that could not easily be scaled down. Even when the house stood empty for months, core staff remained on salary, maintaining rooms, machinery, and grounds in anticipation of the owner's return. This relentless human resource cost, locked in by tradition and necessity, became one of the most significant and least visible drains on estate finances. Hearst Castle's mechanical infrastructure demanded constant attention and cash. The estate's isolation on the California coast meant there was no municipal water or power to tap. Instead, engineers built a self-sufficient system, a hydroelectric plant, diesel generators, and a water pumping station that ran day and night. Utility meter logs from 1907 to 1915 record the rhythm of this operation. Gallons of water pumped, kilowatt hours generated, fuel delivered by the barrel. The annual bill for just water and power averaged $5,000, a figure that covered not only fuel but also the wages of resident engineers, routine maintenance, and emergency repairs. The hydroelectric plant, while advanced for its time, could not meet every demand. Diesel and coal-fired generators filled the gaps, especially during peak use or dry spells when water flow dropped. This dual system required overlapping teams of mechanics and electricians, whose rosters show year-round employment regardless of guest occupancy. Fuel deliveries had to be scheduled months in advance, with storage tanks and spare parts kept on site to avoid costly downtime. The sheer scale of Hearst Castle amplified every expense. Oversized rooms, endless corridors, and multiple guest houses meant that heating, lighting, and water pressure could never be managed efficiently. Each additional wing or fountain added to the estate's daily utility load, compounding the logistical treadmill. Engineering rosters list at least 4 full-time staff dedicated solely to the power and water systems, their salaries and overtime tracked in the same ledgers as fuel and parts. Unlike payroll or imported marble, these expenses were invisible to visitors but inescapable for the estate's accountants. The $5,000 spent each year on pumping and generation was not a luxury but a baseline requirement, one more fixed cost in the relentless machinery that kept Hearst Castle running. Oheka Castle's financial ledgers reveal that the estate's vastness extended well beyond its main house. The surrounding grounds, lakes, and outbuildings formed a complex infrastructure with their own relentless demands. Maintenance records from the early 1920s detail the recurring costs of keeping Oheka's artificial lake navigable. Dredging logs show that every 5 years, crews were hired to remove silt and debris, a process that cost $2,500 per cycle, an amount equivalent to a skilled worker's annual wage at the time. The expense was not optional. Without regular dredging, the lake risked flooding its banks or becoming unusable for boating and irrigation. The stables stood as another ongoing liability. Annual invoices for horse feed, blacksmith services, and carriage repairs totaled $5,000, documented in both Parsons and company ledgers and period interviews with estate managers. This figure covered not just the animal's care, but also the wages of stable hands, the replacement of worn harnesses, and the upkeep of carriages and tack. Even as automobiles began to appear on the estate's private roads, the traditional stable operation continued, locked in by the routines of country life and the expectations of guests. Greenhouses from the same period required steady fuel. Greenhouse fuel sheets list deliveries of coal and oil needed to heat the estate's extensive glasshouses through winter. These structures, filled with exotic plants and out-of-season produce, required constant attention from horticultural staff and regular repairs to glass and boilers. Storm repair invoices, especially after the 1926 hurricane, show sudden spikes in outlay for fallen trees, road washouts, and damaged outbuildings, a reminder that nature could upend even the most carefully planned budgets. The external systems of Oheka, its dredged lakes, working stables, and heated greenhouses, operated as hidden engines of cost. Each was essential to the estate's function and reputation, yet each added a layer of financial pressure that never relented. These recurring expenses, often invisible to visitors, steadily eroded the margins that once made grand estate life possible. Federal tax law redrew the financial map for estate owners almost overnight. The Revenue Act of 1913 imposed a national income tax, starting at 1% for incomes above $3,000, and rising to 7% for the highest earners. For families whose fortunes were tied up in land, art, and securities, this new annual obligation introduced a steady drain on cash reserves. Just 3 years later, Congress added an estate tax, beginning at 1% on properties over $5 million and climbing to 10% for estates exceeding $10 million. These rates, combined with rising property assessments, created statutory cash demands that could not be deferred or negotiated. Unlike payroll or fuel bills, tax assessments arrived as fixed, legal requirements, regardless of a family's liquidity or the estate's income in a given year. The result was a growing pressure to generate cash, often by selling land, mortgaging assets, or liquidating collections just to satisfy the government's claim. For many estates, these statutory obligations transformed chronic deficits into acute crisis, setting the stage for forced sales and the gradual dismantling of inherited wealth. The collapse of agricultural profits during the Great Depression, paired with a sudden scarcity of domestic labor and the rise of top marginal income tax rates to 94% in the mid-1940s, forced estate owners into a series of stark decisions. As annual deficits outpaced income, the typical options narrowed, and some families opened their homes to the public, charging admission to offset costs. Others sold off land or art collections to pay mounting tax bills. In many cases, entire properties were liquidated, divided among heirs, or converted into hotels, schools, or museums. When the cost of maintaining these estates exceeded what their remaining assets could generate, owners divested, abandoned, or repurposed them. The grand house became an unsustainable liability, not a legacy. The fate of these estates was never simply about changing tastes. When concentrated wealth, abundant labor, and minimal taxation vanished, so did their economic foundation. Today, the costs of grandeur still hinge on the systems beneath it. It is a reminder that architecture endures only as long as its underlying structure survives.